Hello, and welcome to Fairs and Feedback. We hope that this will help to instruct evaluators or anyone working with youth on how to provide positive feedback or to give constructive feedback when necessary. In 4-H programming, we have many reasons that we like to evaluate our kids. Youth benefit from hearing feedback, both the positive as well as those things that they can do better. But there are some ways that are better, that are more preferred for giving feedback to youth. So exhibiting at fairs, that is an important part of what we do. And that is a great time to interact with youth and to provide them with the necessary information for improvement or for validation of a job well done. Evaluators have a responsibility to evaluate, to educate, and to encourage. And this can be accomplished by gathering information from the youth and sharing information with the exhibitor. This is not always possible to do this face-to-face, as is the case when exhibits go to state fair. However, whenever a face-to-face evaluation can be provided, it should be, so that the youth and the evaluator can benefit from the experience. At state fair, the feedback is provided in written format, and so it may take a little bit longer in order to put that information down on the evaluation form. So in 4-H programming, we utilize the Danish system. What is the Danish system? Well, basically it is a recognition system in which a youth's project is evaluated against a standard. We do not put youth against each other. So it is not that Johnny did better than Susie or anything like that. It is a matter of how did their quilt, how did their pie, how did their STEM projects stand up to the standard of expectation. This is really about building skills. This is about learning by doing, which is a great premise of what 4-H programming and 4-H projects are based on. This provides recognition for a maximum number of exhibits or for the contestants themselves. But it really is meant to be judging that project against a standard. So things that should not be taken into consideration when doing these exhibits is you gave away too many blues, you gave away too many reds, you gave away too few whites, those types of things. If it is a blue standard project that meets the expectations for that particular item, it is a blue ribbon item. If it shows that it needs a lot of improvement, then perhaps that is a white level ribbon. And it's not about judging against a rubric. It's about using that rubric to communicate to the youth what they can do better or what they have done very well. But at the end of the day, did that item meet the standards of expectation for that project item? You should not necessarily be making huge exceptions for their age or for the difference in abilities or any of those types of things. How does the project meet the standard of expectation? Again, considerations. Items should be evaluated against a standard, not against other items that you may see. So if a club did a whole bunch of the same project, let's say they tie-dyed t-shirts, each of those youth should have that project evaluated against the standard of expectation and not one against the other. One student did better in the project than the other student did. That's not the idea behind Danish system of evaluation. The exhibitor is not the one being evaluated. It is the project being evaluated. So again, how does that fit against the standard? What skills were learned or mastered? What skills may still need some support or improvements? And you cannot assume that a child, because of their age, is going to have a certain skill set. So the expectation that a 19-year-old should do better at a project than a 13-year-old is errant, in that the 13-year-old could very well have mastered the project, and the 19-year-old may have just started and has not yet reached that level of mastery. What do the ribbons mean? So really, in the Danish system, it's all about, again, evaluating against that standard and how well did the youth meet that standard of expectation. So if they get a blue and excellent ribbon, it met the standard. It is high quality work. It is not needing a lot of improvement, if any improvement. If it's a good, it met most of the standards. You've met most of the expectations. And there are some areas that need some improvement. And then the white ribbon, the worthy ribbon, is that the youth met a few of the standards of expectation for that item, but there is great room for improvements, or for that youth to build on skills that they may need in addition to what they already have. Excuse me. 4-H ribbons, in this case, they are not placings. They are not first places, second places, third places, and so on. It really is it a blue ribbon quality item, a red ribbon quality item, or a white ribbon quality item? Excuse me. So when providing feedback to youth, there are two ways that you're going to provide feedback. You're going to provide them positive feedback, and then we're going to get into the constructive feedback. So when giving feedback, we want our kids to learn from that experience. And so we evaluate. We are a good listener. We want to hear what they say, what they have learned, or if it is something where it is a written response, we're reading that and we're absorbing what the youth is telling us about that project and what they have learned and what they have maybe improved upon, or a skill that they have built upon. So those are the really important things that we are listening for, we are looking for. We want to have a balance between what the youth stated was their goal and what the standard is, and what the expectation is based on the things that the youth was able to control. We want to educate. We want to provide them with the necessary information so that if there are things that can be improved upon, we can do that. Or if they did something really, really well, we want to comment on how well they did that part, so that then they can continue to move down that path, continue to do the things they're doing really well, but then improve upon the things and the knowledge base that they need in order to move further along within that project area. And then we want to encourage. We want to encourage the kids to do better. We want to tell them how much we appreciate their hard work. We want to smile. You know, when you are working face to face with a child, it's really important that you make eye contact, that you smile, that you actively listen to what they have to say, and then you acknowledge that what they say is important. Make sure that your tone of voice is fairly low and even, so that they don't feel that you are potentially making judgments, or you are being harsh or lenient. It can go either way. In the reflection process of asking and receiving information about that project. 4-Hers learn from your words and the examples that you set as the evaluator. So just keep that in the back of your mind. You are the mentor. You are the teacher in this moment. Now, yes, we can learn from the kids at the same time, but it is a give and take relationship. One will learn from the other, and it tends to go in a circular kind of a manner. There's a lot of different ways to say you did a good job, okay? And always saying the same thing. I fall into this rut a lot when I give feedback, and I have to really think about the words that I am using when it's positive feedback or constructive feedback. We want to make sure that we're using a variety of ways to tell kids that they're doing a good job or that they can make improvements. So you can say things like, "Good for you. I'm so glad that you set this goal and you tried your best to reach that. You've got your brain in gear today. You're really thinking, you're really challenging me today." These are all ways in which to share a positive experience with the youth. Youth need the positive validation first before you provide them with constructive feedback, before you provide them with information for which they can make improvements. So it is a process to think about it. Always start with the positive and then follow up with those things that could be done better. There is a document that you can click on in this slide, or that you can access through your educator or on our website, that you can actually print, that has this on it. So it helps to remind you of all the different ways that we can tell kids that they're doing a great job, they're doing good things, they're learning in positive ways. So keep that in mind, that there are many ways to tell kids they've done a good job. So now we move on to the constructive feedback. The positive feedback is the really easy part most of the time, because we can always see things that kids have done really, really well, and that helps to encourage them to move forward. Right here, it says it on this slide. In a nutshell, positive feedback is a reinforcement tool. It's something that helps the kids feel good about what they're doing. But constructive feedback is that mechanism which is going to allow them to develop. It is going to allow them to move forward in their project area, especially when presented in the proper way. So here we have, I have borrowed this information from Michigan State University Extension. There's a really nice article that is referenced here, and you can click on that talks about giving constructive feedback. And feedback can help us improve our skills and attitudes, but it can be difficult to give and receive. These tips that you're going to hear can help you offer the type of feedback that makes our community stronger, make our kids stronger, and build upon their skills. So let's keep going. So tips for giving this kind of feedback. Okay, feedback can help us improve our skills, and that's really what we're looking for when we work with youth. We want them to build upon the skills that they have and to improve them as they continue to move forward. We don't want to do things that are going to discourage them from continuing in that project area. If they have the passion, if they have the love for it, if they have the desire and the curiosity, then we want to encourage that. Regardless of the current skills level, we want to encourage them to improve those skills levels. So utilize descriptive language rather than evaluative language. So, it's really easy to try to defend something, and it's really easy to fall into this trap. But if we're using the more descriptive language, especially when we talk about specifics, you can't learn from things that are too general. You need to be specific. So if you're talking to a child about their pie crust, you want to be very specific. Well, it was not as light and fluffy as I might expect it to be. It's very dense. And use words that obviously are age appropriate for the youth that you are working with. The way you describe something to a 9-year-old will be very, very different than the way you're going to describe something to a 16, 17, 18-year-old. So think about that when providing that feedback. Be very specific in the comments. We can't improve upon what we don't know. And so if we just say with our positive, "Oh, you did a good job," the youth is still looking for those things that they can do better. Why was it only a red, but you said I did a good job? So be specific in that feedback, but try not to do it in a negative way. So you can phrase things in ways that you did a really good job describing how you put the shortening in the flour. I would suggest next time, try this. And because you're evaluating from a point of expertise, you should be able to provide those types of specific items of feedback. Consider what is in their realm of control. So there are certain things environmentally they cannot control. So for instance, if it is something that is affected by humidity, if it is something that is affected by temperature, and right now we're experiencing extremely warm, extremely humid time of the year, perhaps that has an effect. And so think about those things. And they can't control the weather, but they can control how long something was in the oven. They can control what temperature that oven was set at. They can control how long something sat at room temperature, even though they can't control the temperature itself. So those are things to take into consideration when giving feedback. If it's something they cannot control, then it's not necessarily a point of providing feedback to them about that, other than to maybe mention, I recognize that you did not have control over the weather. I recognize you did not have control over XYZ. And then consider the needs of the person you're providing the feedback to and the timing of that feedback. There's a lot we can read into the body language of the youth that we are working with. Some are very shy. Some are going to be very outgoing and want to speak with you. Some are going to be much more reserved, or maybe it's that you've asked them a question that they really don't know the answer to, and it has made them uncomfortable. So how can you rephrase? One should always consider if the feedback should be shared privately or publicly. It is good to remember the general rule is to praise in public and to criticize in private. I don't particularly care for the word criticize, but still, when you are providing constructive feedback, really think about where you are and who is around you when providing that type of feedback. Kids don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers or in front of their parents or someone in authority. And so it's much better to say, hey, could we go talk about this? I do this all of the time when I'm at a state fair and I'm teaching kids about work skills and things that they can do better. And if it's something that is of great concern that I know they can do better, but I also don't want to embarrass them, we go and we have a private conversation, kind of off in my office, and say, hey, this you're doing really, really well, but can we please improve upon these things? Do you need help figuring out how to improve upon those things? Or I might even ask them, what do you think you could do better? And what can I do better? Because it's a two-way street depending on what level you are working with kids on. So again, some really great information here. So how do I do this? How do I give constructive feedback? This is a learned skill. It is not necessarily something that is intuitive for folks. And so again, you're going to make your feedback very specific to that youth's work. You're not going to comment on the standard. You're going to comment on what that child did and brought in that moment to share with you and to share with, quite frankly, anybody else who views that project. Point out areas where the youth showed a lot of effort and where they did things really well. So if you're talking about an art project, you might talk about a specific brush stroke, or you might talk about photography, a camera angle, or the type of lens that they use. What is it that they did really, really well that you can comment on? Because there's always one or two things, always, that kids have done really well. It could even be as simple as how nice and neat their handwriting is when they've written out their universal evaluation form. So it could be, this is really nice. I can read it really well. And I'm so glad that you shared all of this information with me. So those are all part of the exhibit. Offer clear examples on how they can improve something. So if you're talking about the neatness around the edge of a pie, give them suggestions on how to make that neater. Don't just tell them, well, it needs to be neater. They need the suggestions, they need the feedback so that they can improve the skills. So that's really important to give them those specifics about what they can do better. Be positive about the youth's prospects if they put in the hard work to improve. Comment on, if you bring this next time, I know you're going to improve. I can't wait to see what you'll bring back. If you can neaten up that pie edge by doing XYZ, I know you'll have a much better result next time for your pie. It's going to taste better. It's going to look better, that type of a thing. Encourage the youth to ask questions if they don't understand your feedback. Now, this is difficult when you have to provide just written feedback. However, if there is the opportunity to talk to the youth and to have them, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything that didn't make sense? How can I help you? Those are really great ways to engage the youth in a conversation and let them walk away feeling like they've had a positive interaction in learning how to improve the skills that they have, and they don't walk away wondering, what could I have done differently? Constructive feedback examples. So there's a whole bunch of these provided in the website. Many of them are either from the workplace or they are specific to a school setting, but they all have similar applications in terms of how we want to interact and how we want to provide this constructive feedback to our kiddos. So you're doing well, but there's always room for improvement. So you may have a kid that is constantly soaring right at the top. They're doing really well, but you want to assure them that there's always a time that we could do just a little bit better on something. Try this. So if it's handwriting, if you're reading a handwritten piece and their handwriting tends to get a little on the sloppy side, you know what? That happens to all of us. I know when I get tired, my handwriting gets really sloppy. And so, hey, you did a really good job. This is a lot of pages, a lot of paragraphs. That's a lot of writing for you. And I'm really impressed at how much you wrote. I'm wondering if next time, maybe you could focus a little bit more on keeping your margins all the same. Or maybe we focus on making sure that all our capital letters look like capital letters, because sometimes it's a little hard to tell the difference between the two. So those are ways that we can do that. And you can also, again, say, do you have any questions about that? How can I help you? You've put a lot of hard work and it's starting to show. These are for kids that you see over and over again, or maybe they have multiple projects in that area. And you say, you put a lot of work into all of this stuff. I can really tell you worked really, really hard. Can we talk a little bit about maybe what you could do better next time? How can I help you do that? Again, kids want to be helped. And they want to know that they're heard and that you are listening to them. You're making good progress, but don't forget, you got to focus on your weaknesses too. Now, this is a tough one to give kids because we don't often feel comfortable pointing out things in terms of weaknesses. But in the right setting, this can be used to assist a child in understanding that just because it's a weakness, just because it is something that they struggle with, doesn't mean they can't improve upon that item. It's all about repetition. It's about wonderment and curiosity and how we can do a little bit better at what we do. I've seen your improvements over time, and the next step, as a next step, it's a good idea to, and then what would that be? This is where the specifics come in. If you can be super specific about that next step, what should you do next time? Like if you're seeing a younger child that has made cookies for the very first time and they've set a goal for themselves that they want to bake a pie, then let's talk with them about how can they improve to get to that next step so that they can be successful with the more advanced items. So those are all very, very helpful things. The other is, as I said, take them aside. If you need to talk to them about something that you really feel is important and they need to improve upon it, like if we're talking about in terms of animal care at a fair, it is never comfortable to have to point out to a youth that maybe they're not taking care of their animals in the way that is envisioned or desired. And so that is a time when you should have a private conversation with that youth and talk about, hey, I really like your cow. Okay. I really like your cow. Can you tell me a little bit about that breed of cow? And I was wondering, is there something that you could see that maybe we could do a little bit better? And hopefully that conversation goes in the right direction. This really does require some time. This is not evaluation when providing quality constructive feedback is not something that can be accomplished in a mere seconds. It is something that does take time. But at the end of the day, youth will value that constructive feedback, and it can be done in a respectful and mutually received manner. So the youth is more important than the project itself. So if giving a youth some constructive feedback is going to be detrimental to that youth, second think it. Give it another thought as to how you might be wording something. We never want to deter kids from exploring and building upon skills and being curious about the world. That is how we grow. And that is how we move forward with our projects, with our desires, with our hopes, with our dreams. So it's really important to keep in mind that the youth is the most important part of this process. The 4-H'er is their own best exhibit. They can probably tell you more about that project than maybe what it looks like. You never know. That project may not look like an A1, A++ project. Blue ribbon, excellent project. But what did that youth learn? How valuable was the experience in building a bird's house? Did they make mistakes and learn from those mistakes? They are their own exhibit, own best exhibit, and they can tell you what's important. Again, with written responses is a little more difficult, but I think if you really read their responses, it can help to formulate that vision of where that youth was coming from and where they were headed. And there are many other things that you can read here. I think the one at the bottom is perhaps, in my opinion, one of the most important things to remember. Our job is to teach 4-H members how to think. It is not to teach them what to think. So the more questions you can ask, the more things you can spur from a point of curiosity and wonderment, the more that youth will begin to think on their own and will work their way through the process to learn from what they are doing and from what they are hearing and from what they are experiencing. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. I am always available and happy to answer questions that folks may have. This is just a general way to really think about the difference between giving exclusively positive feedback and how to give constructive feedback. We don't ever want to criticize our youth. We want to provide them with valuable feedback so that they can continue to move forward in their project areas. They can continue to learn, and they can become experts at what it is that they most desire to become an expert at.